So, when President Trump was first elected, he vowed to replace the Affordable Care Act with a plan that would guarantee health insurance to every single American. So, now he recently announced that his replacement to Obamacare is out for review. And holy crap, it's shittier than any of us could have imagined. And I'm not just being hyperbolic because it's so bad that even other Republicans are shitting on it. So what exactly is in this bill and why is it so bad? So the bill states clearly that no federal dollars are to be appropriated for abortion. However, that's already illegal. Federal funds cannot go towards abortion. So this is not just redundant, but, it's a little bit more malicious because since organizations like Planned Parenthood provide abortion, well, they'll also receive no federal dollars for other procedures as well. So basically, this will defund Planned Parenthood. Now, never mind the fact that abortions only account for about 3% of Planned Parenthood's total services, and women also use their services for cancer screenings and family planning. But because this would make the GOP feel better, they're deciding that they also want this bill to provide a clause that would defund Planned Parenthood. Now, additionally, with respect to abortion, the measure forbids spending federal tax subsidies on health plans that include coverage of abortion. Even if the customer doesn't get an abortion, this would dramatically shrink working Americans' access to insurance-covered abortions, or would lead to insurers dropping abortion coverage from their plans, or both. Customers could buy separate policies to cover abortions, but couldn't use the federal subsidy to help pay for them. Now, they are also repealing the individual mandate. Now, the logic behind the individual mandate is pretty complex because what Obama was trying to do with the individual mandate is by penalizing people who chose not to buy insurance if they were healthy, he wanted to keep the cost of healthcare down for everyone. So, in the end, it sounds great. It sounds like a win at first. No more tax penalties and you don't have to have health insurance, but at the end of the day, this will ultimately lead to a huge increase in prices. Now, the federal government will no longer mandate that insurance companies cover certain things that are really important, like hospitalization, maternity care, and mental health services, along with other benefits. So for states like Texas and Mississippi, who just generally screw over their citizens, they no longer have to mandate that insurance companies must provide hospitalization, for example, which seems like a pretty non-negotiable part if you're buying healthcare, if you ask me. I mean, I think that if you are paying for health insurance, shouldn't it not even be a question that hospitalization is covered? Shouldn't mental health services be offered as well? Because I think that your brain, like all other parts of your body, needs medical care, but they're saying, you know what? If you're in a Republican state where they like to screw you over, we're not going to mandate that. It's up to your state. So petition your local government to do something about it. The federal government will not get involved to protect our citizens. I think that's pretty unreasonable if you ask me. Now, also, the federal subsidy will no longer be based on income. It will be based on age. So if you're younger and you need healthcare and you can't afford it, well, you're basically shit out of luck with this new healthcare plan. And if you're in a larger family, well, no more than 5 family members would be eligible to receive the healthcare subsidy. So this would be devastating to members of the middle class. It would basically raise healthcare premiums for larger families and for younger middle-class workers. Now, this bill also includes a tax cut for the rich. Not making this up. So if you make more than $200,000 per year, which is about 1% of the population, well then in sum, that proportion of the population will receive over $346 billion in tax cuts over 10 years. So he is raising the cost of insurance for the middle class while giving the rich a huge tax break. This is just a brazenly idiotic strategy. It's not going to bode well for you electorally, and you're going to piss off a lot of voters that supported you in 2016, Trump. Now, the worst part is that the Medicaid expansion will be killed as of 2020. So they will move towards a block-granted system, which will result ultimately in less federal funding. So this means that citizens will get less help from the federal government, and they're going to have to rely on their state governments. Now, as we all know, if you live in Louisiana, in Mississippi, where your state government does not want to expand Medicaid, where they offer less help to the poor and unfortunate, well, then you are shit out of luck. So ultimately, without Medicaid, people will die. Now, on a good note, they are keeping the clause in the Affordable Care Act that mandates that insurance providers are not allowed to discriminate against people with pre-existing conditions. And also, if you're 26, you can still stay on your parents' plan, but everything else about this bill is horrible. So to summarize their plan, Repealing the individual mandate will almost certainly lead to a sharp increase in insurance premiums, as shitty as that clause is. Now, the federal government also is not going to help you out as much, especially if you're young or if you're a woman, and millions of poor people will lose their health insurance. So the bottom line is that lots and lots of poor people will lose their health insurance, and if you're fortunate enough to keep your health insurance plan, well then the price will go up for you. That's what this plan would do, and the Affordable Care Act is already broken. The way that you fix it easily is you just create a public option, so that way you have a government-run plan that's optional, and then these insurance companies who like to rip off customers will be forced to compete with the government. Now, that's just a Band-Aid on top of a bigger problem. What you really need is a single-payer system, but at a minimum, a public option would be a quick fix, but they don't want to do it because they want to rely exclusively on these health insurance providers that rip people off. And this is because health insurance CEOs are in Donald Trump's ear. He's literally bragging about this. He posted on Twitter that he met with CEOs of health insurance companies. Well, let me ask you this, Trump. Have you held any meetings with the poor lately? Have you held meetings with someone who went bankrupt because they had health insurance, but it didn't cover their medical condition? See, this is the problem. This is why we say that the system is rigged. It's because the rich, the CEOs who game the system, they're in the ear of the politicians because they donate to the politicians. But the poor people who just don't donate enough to politicians, I mean, that $10 donation isn't going to buy you access. Well, those people get screwed time and again. And it's so frustrating. Now, thankfully, there is a huge chance that this bill will never see the light of day because, as I mentioned, even Republicans are lambasting this bill. So it also has a huge amount of opposition from dominant organizations. So the AARP and American Medical Association announced their opposition to the bill and that they will be trying to kill the bill. Now, additionally, conservative interest groups like the Club for Growth don't think it's free market enough, whatever that means, and even some Tea Party and Koch-backed groups oppose this bill. Now, there's also Republican senators who have come out against it, like Senator Mike Lee, Rob Portman, Lisa Murkowski, Cory Gardner, and Shelley Moore Capito. Their opposition to this bill is primarily contingent on them ending the Medicaid expansion, because they know that there will be hell to pay, and their constituents, if they thought they were pissed off now, where they're going to be really pissed off if they do try to kill the Medicaid expansion. It's just bad policy, because if you do things that just brazenly screw over your constituents, there will be backlash. And some of these Republicans are at least smart enough to realize, yeah, I'm not dumb enough to screw over my own constituents who rely on this Medicaid expansion, who rely on Medicaid to pay their medical bills, to get insurance. So it doesn't make sense as to why they would do something that's so brazenly idiotic. Yet, GOP insiders are defying their own party, like Paul Ryan, to brag about how amazing this bill is.
Look at what this does. This is a conservative wish list. Look at what this bill does. It repeals Obamacare's taxes. That's $1 trillion in tax relief for families that will help them with the cost of health care. It repeals Obamacare's spending, Medicaid expansion, and the Obamacare subsidies. Medicaid expansion.
Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion.
It repeals Obamacare's spending, Medicaid expansion, and the Obamacare subsidies.
So that, to me, is just shameless. Paul Ryan is shameless. You have the Speaker of the House of Representatives bragging about gutting Medicaid, repealing the Medicaid expansion, so that way his constituents, the poorest of the poor, the most disadvantaged people in the country, will not be able to get health insurance. What kind of a country brags about that? What kind of a country elects representatives that in turn screw them over and make it so that way they do not receive healthcare like Medicaid and they die? I mean, this is sickening. So this plan, I hope it never sees the light of day, because this really is shittier than anyone could have imagined. It's a horrible policy, and I hope it's defeated, and we have to do everything we can to defeat it, because if you thought Obamacare was bad, Trumpcare is exponentially worse than Obamacare. The answer is a single-payer healthcare system. We need to move towards a Medicare for all system where we just pay into healthcare with our taxes, and even if you can't afford healthcare, well, we're all subsidizing this system through our tax dollars, like Canada, like France, like Britain, who has different variants of a Medicare for all system or universal national health system. We need that. But if we're not going to have that, we need a public option. We're just lowering the bar more and more, and it's unacceptable, really.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.